Hello everyone. For today's video is going to be something a little bit different. I have recently discovered or rediscovered a program that I used to use a long time ago to create 3D animations. And that program is called Strata Design 3D. It used to be called Strata Studio back many years ago when I used it. And I recently rediscovered it in the App Store. So I have been having a lot of fun relearning how to use it. And I thought I would show it to you guys, just a kind of a brief introduction. This isn't really a tutorial. It's more just a looking around, showing you what it can do. Rearrange these palettes here a little bit. Okay. So, this is a 3D program. And you start out with this plane with nothing on it. This is an axis, and this is an axis, and this is an axis. So you have three different planes to work on here. And what I like to do to start out is we're going to move that to orthographic. You see how this is in perspective? We'll zoom in here. Okay. And orthographic basically means that all of these lines are at 45 degrees so that it's easier to measure and know when things are lining up. And the other thing I like to do is you can split this window into multiple views. And I usually like to do 4. And then we can change each one of these to look at a different side of the object. And you have this little handy guide here to let you know the x-axis is red, the y-axis is green, and the blue axis is Z. So let's go and put a shape. We'll start with a cube. Let's zoom in here a little bit. So we click. If we hold down the shift key, it'll make it a complete square. So one click gives us a flat plane cube. And then the next click gives us a three-dimensional cube. I should have said square. The first click gives us a square, the second click gives us a cube. There we go. Now we have something to focus on. And you can see the difference here. This is the orthographic view, where each one of these squares is exactly the same size, no matter how close or how far away it is from you. With these squares, in the regular perspective view, you will see that these squares here are bigger and these squares are smaller that are farther away from you. So this is much more of a traditional perspective mode like you would see in real life. But this view helps you understand and measure more accurately. So we'll keep this view the same, but we're going to change all the rest of these to orthographic just for now. And then this one will be the left view. Whoops. I don't want to draw something else here. Go away. This one will be the right view. Well, let's make this the front. It's hard to tell with the squares. And then this will be the right. And as we draw more shapes, this will be more apparent. The differences between these three. Right now they just look kind of the same, just a different shading. Zoom out a little bit. So we can also change the perspective on the fly. If we need to see a very specific angle, we can rotate the entire view around to see all the different sides. And we can come right back. I'm using a lot of keyboard shortcuts. So if this was an actual tutorial, I'd be telling you what I'm pressing, but if you would like me to do a tutorial, let me know. But I'd have to get a whole lot better at this. Right now I'm just kind of reintroducing myself to it. The other thing you can do is change how the shape looks. Right now these sides are shaded to kind of give us an idea of what it would look like when the light is hitting it. But we can't really see the back side. So what we're going to do is we can change this to a wireframe. And then we can see all of the different sides, kind of making it invisible. We also have a point cloud, which right now, because it's such a simple shape, you can see these 4 little dots for the corners, but that's really not very useful right now. So that's another way to view the shapes. Now, let's add another shape. Let's view from the top. And I'm going to grab my pen tool. And I'm going to draw a shape just like I would in a program like Illustrator. Oops, I deleted the whole thing. I didn't want to do that. Like I said, I am just reacquainting myself with this program. It is, we'll fix that in a little bit. It is not as powerful as something like Blender or Maya, or one of those really high-end programs. But it is perfect for doing basic animation and 3D illustrations. You're not going to make a full-length feature movie with it. I know that somebody tried a while back. I'm just adjusting some of these points here. But it has been around a long time, obviously. And so it has a lot of powerful features. Okay, so I've created this little shape. And I edited the outline. So now we can go back over here. We see that we can move it if we drag these little red handles. on the X and the Z axis. We'll move it up here. Okay. So now because we're looking at it right on the edge, and this is a flat shape, we don't see anything but a line here in these two views. Here it is from the top, and here it is from the corner. Now I'm going to take and make a copy of it, I think. There we go. Let's get rid of our box. We don't need that anymore. Now this tool is called the Extrude tool. And with the Extrude tool, we can take a simple shape and we can pull it up into the third dimension like that. And you can see it looks like that. Now this other tool, if we hold this down, we go to the lathe tool, we can take this shape and spin it all the way around. And create a completely different shape out of it. Now you can see we have kind of a cap shape or a dome shape. And so now what was once these flat views, we can now see them in their different dimensions. So this is what it looks like from the left side, the right side, the top, and the corner. So I'm going to rotate this, and we can move this into position. So you can see you can make some pretty interesting shapes pretty easily with this program. Now they're all resting on the same base here. We can also create, you'll notice how that one was hollow. This one, we can create a shape that is filled in. So then we go back to our little anvil up here. Let's zoom in. Because you want to have kind of a flat area to spin it around if you're going to lathe it. We can make this a little bit more of an interesting shape. We can make this a curve. There we go. We can also add a point. Okay, that looks good. So we'll exit out of there. Do our lathe tool. And spin this around. Now we have a shape that looks like that. It's kind of neat. Looks kind of like a lampshade. Move it up so it's sitting on the same ground plane. And we can also scale it. Let's make it a little smaller here. We can scale it proportionally, or we can stretch it out. That looks pretty cool. So now you can see we have kind of lighting here on this side and some shadows here. If we want to see what this really looks like, we can render it. And that's this tool right here. We can do just a really basic rough rendering. You can kind of see it smooths everything out. But we have some really dark areas here and it's kind of just floating in space. So let's go to the ground tab. We're going to put a ground plane in, and we're going to add this texture. So now when we render it, you'll see instead of just black space, we have this gray surface that everything is sitting on. We still really have some really harsh shadows. Things just kind of disappear in here. Looks like you're on the moon or something. So the other thing we can do is create a light dome. And that just kind of is a overall light that helps fill in some shadows. We're going to bring, this is another light. You can see we can move it around and it changes. But this is the light that's giving us the really harsh shadows. So we're going to turn this down. And we'll have our light dome. That's still really bright. We've kind of gone the opposite direction. So let's turn them both down. That's not helping us, is it? That's looking better. So now we can see the difference between the base here. Everything's not just disappearing into shadows. There. And this basically just renders it out as a still image. If we wanted to change the view, we could do that. Then it looks like that. We can also change it to perspective view. And that'll give us an even better, more realistic look. So, the other thing we can do is we can apply some textures. So here down at the bottom we have some pre-installed or preloaded textures that we can add. So here's silver. Double click that. And gold brushed. We'll do silver and gold. That sounds good. So now we can just drag one of these textures onto a shape. And now when we render it, we're actually starting to render the properties of the texture as well. Let's get rid of that silver. Let's do Here's some slate stone. And these will probably look pretty ugly right now. That looks interesting. But it's kind of just flat. This is not really doing anything except just a basic gray. So what we want to do is significantly improve our rendering. And basically it's changing the mathematical formula that it uses to figure out how the light is bouncing around the scene. And when we do that, it really helps bring in a lot more subtle textures into the scene. We now see that this isn't flat gray anymore. And we also see that we have a little bit of reflection here around the edges. And we're getting a much better, softer light. Okay, so here we see the completed rendering. I had to pause for a little bit between recording the screen for this video and rendering this image. My computer was getting hot and running the fan very loudly, so you probably heard that a little bit near the end. So I paused it so this could completely render. So you can see the quality is much better. We have a little bit of reflection around here. The gray background has much more of a subtle gradient to it. We have a little bit of a shadow here and a hard shadow here. So the quality goes up tremendously, but then the time that it takes to render it goes up as well. So I usually will render something just for a test like that, just to make sure that it is looking kind of how I want it, and then rendering in the more detailed and higher quality once it's all done. So I also wanted to show you what I've been building as a tutorial to help me understand and remember how to use this program. So here is a scene that I am working with of a castle. And let's zoom in here. You can see all the different components. Here it is from the top. The different towers, the different buildings. Here it is from the front. It's kind of dark, but once it renders out, it's easier to see. So, for instance, we have this tower here. Right now it's all grouped together. Let's ungroup that. Okay. So we have this tower. You can double click on it. And because it's all grouped together, it is its own entity that we can work with on our own. And it's made up of individual objects. And then we can break it down even further. So we have just this part of the turret, like the parapet. And here we can see the point cloud, the outline, the wireframe, the flat rendering, and the smooth rendering. Not much difference between those two. So this makes it a lot easier to move around. It's not as intensive for the computer to render something like this. And it helps you understand what it looks like when you're putting it together. So we can see that these are cut out, these little notches. But in the actual reality, they're these little blocks that are set to be antimatter. And so they act as negative shapes that subtract from the shape. So we can see what that looks like. And then we can see it all together. And this is basically the same shape, just copied multiple times. And here we have the little, like, chapel. Again, just some really basic geometric shapes put together. I don't have any textures on them yet or anything. But together they make a neat little castle. This is probably the most complicated shape. I'm going to move the intensity of this light up just so you can see it a little bit better. So this is going to be really bright. Yep, way too bright. So this is a fun exercise. This is basically just tapping the very fundamental aspects of this program. You can get into a lot more with textures and animating shapes and creating more complex things. And as I learn this, if you guys like, I can do another one and show you what I've learned. Here we have a camera, and this is actually animated. We have here the direction that the lens is shooting, and then we have its different positions in time. And there's an end to this somewhere. Yeah, right here. So if we double click the camera, we see that's changing the focal length. We see what the camera sees, which gives us an even more realistic view of the scene. And here we have our animation timeline. And the camera is the only thing that is moving. If you see it down here, you'll see the red box is changing, showing you the widening view of the camera as it's taking in more and more of the scene. So now the camera is showing that. If we move this, we're moving what we're actually looking at. So it starts to zoom out completely. And yep, so again, that's really bright and overexposed. So here's what the finished rendering looked like. This took about a day to render. And again, there's no textures. So that kind of the downside of 3D is once you create everything, it can sometimes take a very long time to render out. And you can see there's some mistakes here. This doesn't quite meet, and this doesn't quite meet. And it's really kind of hard to tell that until you do a complete render. So let's play this and show you what it looks like. So that's a lot of fun. I enjoy doing 3D like this, creating shapes, animating them. It used to be part of my job when I worked at a company in my late 20s, early 30s. So I hope you've enjoyed this video. If you have, let me know in the comments. If you'd like to see more about this program and kind of follow me along on my journey as I relearn it, let me know. And please subscribe if you haven't. I do all different types of ASMR videos, and I hope that you've found this relaxing. So I will see you guys later. Bye.